I've always been a flirt, even before my first sexual experience. To be honest, I don't consider myself a cheater, although I had already mastered the art of batting my eyelashes, walking sexy, throwing my hair back, putting on red lipstick, and smiling flirtatiously. I never swore or humiliated others, either behind their back or to their face, and I was always clean and well-groomed, not vulgar. Apparently it worked, because I got as many dates as I wanted and many more that I politely turned down. Although I was not to brag attractive, I did not achieve academic success. I wanted to be an actress, but I never got the lead role in university plays, and my grades were so bad that I was almost in danger of expulsion from school. My advisor said, "Amy, you really need to quit theater. Getting to Hollywood is too unlikely to be worth dropping out of college to achieve." Even though I dropped out of drama and other extracurricular activities, except dating, I barely graduated from college. However, I ended up getting a combined bachelor's degree in psychology and sociology, which was rare at my school. The social science job I got right out of college wasn't fun, but through a stroke of luck, I found one that I thought might be interesting, play to my strengths, and be a replacement for my non-existent drama career. I became a relationship tester or operative. What is a relationship tester is a common question. This is something I had never heard of myself until one of my friends told me about it when I was 23. A relationship tester tests the propensity of potential or actual boyfriends, girlfriends, wives, and husbands to cheat on their partners by placing them in close, potentially compromising contact with a member of the opposite sex of comparable appearance and intelligence. The tester is usually hired by the client's partner to test his or her fidelity and provides a report on the target's reliability to the client after an evening or sometimes two spent in close contact with the subject in a social setting. I interviewed with the owner of Deception Inc., named Swanson Geethers, working part-time as a relationship tester. Swanson is an emotional man in his 40s, overweight, plain-looking, and quick-witted, trying to establish an unusual business after moderate success as a nightclub owner and other businesses. I made a good enough impression on him at the interview that he gave me the opportunity to take the screen test. In this test, which Swanson observed, I approached a handsome man with a wedding ring on the street and began a conversation about a fictitious problem. I supposedly needed directions and tips around the city. The man began to flatter me, even though I wasn't overly provocative, and eventually asked me out. I politely declined, returned to the deception office, and Swanson offered me a job. Swanson and Denise are one of the experienced testers working at Deception Inc. They explained the procedures to me. I had to aim only at those men whose appearance and intelligence are comparable to mine, otherwise the testing would be dishonest. Let's say if a Gal Gadot lookalike approached an overweight guy with acne and a receding hairline, would that be a fair test? I could not drink more than one drink with the subject and could never, under any circumstances, use illegal substances. These rules were important, but the main rule, unconditional, was never have sexual relations with the subject, otherwise dismissal and possible civil claims from the client. "Do you have male operatives to check girls and wives?" I asked. "Of course," Denise replied, and Swanson nodded in agreement, "though there are fewer of them. Either there are fewer women prone to cheating, or men are less suspicious in such matters." I had to learn to discreetly use the video and audio recording equipment that was required to be used in every interaction. I was told that I should not be overtly sexual in my approach. My salary and fashion budget for each order remained the same, regardless of whether the target started flirting with me or not. My first job was just a few days after I was hired, and Denise was there for backup. Subject James was the fiancé of Lizzie, a wealthy society lady who began to feel nervous before her wedding due to suspicions that he had a wandering eye. They told me which bar club James was most likely to be at on Friday night, gave me a couple of photos of him and information about his background. After I went through the equipment instructions one more time, I went on my mission. It turned out to be not as easy as I thought, because I was used to guys finding me and starting to flirt. While I shouldn't have harassed James, I definitely should have made him notice me. At first I was nervous and felt tight, but once I relaxed, the skills I learned in acting school took over. And although I couldn't make it into the theater, if my first night as an operative is anything to go by, I might have succeeded in a real-life drama because the entire script went smoothly. I did as I was told and wasn't overly provocative, but James lost his mind over me. After just 2 hours, he was directly begging me for sex. I politely apologized, said that I would go to the toilet, and together with Denise, we left the establishment through the back door. The next day, I wrote a report. Swanson was pleased, not because James turned out to be a cheater, but because when he watched the video and listened to the audio, he was impressed that I followed all the rules, was charming, and my report was concise and to the point. Typically, the tester does not meet with the client, only Swanson does, unless the client specifically requests a meeting. In this case, Lizzie asked for a meeting, I think to personally assess me, because although James was clearly visible on the video, I was not so clearly filmed. After meeting Lizzie and Swanson, I got the clear impression that James was no longer in her life. Even though Lizzie was arrogant, she sincerely thanked me for, as she put it, helping her dodge a bullet. With my new interesting part-time job, the daily routine in the field of social scientific research suddenly no longer seemed so boring to me. Working at Deception Inc. turned out to be useful for me in one more respect. I met my future husband at work. This happened in a very unusual way. Bryce Hubbard was engaged to Marilee Wallace. Marilee's father, Chester, was one of the richest men in our metropolis. In this situation, the client was not Marilee, but Chester, and at the time I met him, I had serious doubts that he would ever tell Marilee that he had hired Deception Inc. to check on Bryce. What made this situation even more unusual was that Chester Wallace insisted on meeting with the operative who would be testing Bryce before the test began. That's why I ended up in the conference room at Deception Inc. on Tuesday night along with Swanson and Chester. I was told to dress the way I would look on the day of the test, so I wore a yellow printed dress, lavender 3-inch heels, small gold earrings, and a shell necklace. Chester Wallace is a very personable man with an aura that suggests he is used to having people jump at his bidding. From the way he looked at me twice and gave me an overly long and firm handshake, I knew I was going to be putting into practice the skills I had hopefully acquired during study situations in negotiation psychology 301 my senior year of college taught by the professor, Bernice Simpson. After a few pleasantries, Chester, with an expression between smugness and contempt on his face, asked, "So, Amy, do you act like a prostitute during tests? Do you often have sex with objects?" I smiled at him, and Swanson had a look of horror on his face. I then turned to Swanson and politely said, "Swanson, leave Mr. Wallace and I alone." "Call me Chester, honey," Mr. Wallace quipped. Swanson started to stutter, so I turned to him again and said, "Swanson, leave Mr. Wallace, and I alone, that means leave now." Swanson stuttered more, then muttered sorry to Wallace and walked away. The door barely had time to close when I said in a quiet voice, smiling, "Mr. Wallace, I know that you are used to being an important person, and people ignore your insults. However, I am an independent contractor and not one of your minions, and I don't care how important you think you are, you will treat me with respect. Is this clear enough even to your usually closed and primitive mind?" His smirk turned into a frown, and he muttered, "You can't talk to me like that, I'm a client." Still smiling, I continued, "Oh, but I just did it. Now you will leave in a huff and demand that Swanson fire me and ensure that I can, as they say, never work in this town again, or you will ask polite, relevant, realistic questions. One more question like that, and you won't have to make a scene. I'll quietly leave with the words, 'All the best, Mr. Wallace, I wish you success in your future endeavors.'" Wallace stared at me for at least a minute with a half-scowling face. I continued to look at him with a smile. Then he shrugged and said, "Okay, now that we've got that out of the way, let me ask you." After which we began to have a reasonable conversation, during which I explained to him my technique, showed him a few seduction techniques, and reminded him again rules. No illegal substances and no sex with the subject. We were both unfailingly polite. After half an hour of mutual exchange of views, he concluded with the words, "Thank you very much, Amy. I've learned a lot from you, and I'm tempted to offer you a job in one of my companies, but my ego can't handle it if you refuse. However, I would like to ask you one favor," he continued, taking out a business card and pen from his suitcase and writing something on it. "I'm open to suggestions," I smiled. Wallace finished writing and handed me his business card. "Instead of a shell necklace, when you meet my future son-in-law Bryce, wear a gold necklace. This business card is my instruction to John Peters, manager of the Galt Jewelry Store. They will sell you a gold necklace on my account. I ask you not to spend more than $2,000, but not less than $1,000. I have a 10% discount, so no jewelry is cheaper than $1,100 or more than $2,200, please." "Of course, Mr. Wallace." "Chester," I added with a smile, to which he returned the same. "A gold necklace would have really gone better with this outfit, but I just didn't have the right one." "There is no need to return it. It's yours, consider it a bonus," he smiled. "That's very nice, Chester," I beamed. We left the conference room, and I'm sure Swanson was trying to eavesdrop, judging by how quickly he ran away as soon as the door started to open. As we walked out into the hallway exchanging pleasantries, Chester turned to Swanson and said, "Swanson, my conversation with Amy has complicated my situation." How is this?" Swanson stammered. "If Bryce flirts with Amy, I'll know he's a cheater and not right for Marilee, but if he doesn't flirt, I'll think he's a fool," Chester said seriously, grinning like a Cheshire cat. All three of us laughed. I picked out the perfect gold necklace, still one of my favorite pieces of jewelry, for $2,500, but I so charmed the store manager that he promised to only bill Chester for $1,999. The meeting with Bryce went smoothly. Bryce turned out to be a charming, pleasant, attractive, polite, and well-mannered man. Besides, he didn't try to flirt with me. When I left the bar club at 1 in the morning, he kissed my hand and ordered a taxi for me. Obviously, I wrote a glowing report on Bryce, including several photos and videos that showed him acting like a true gentleman. "Too bad he's busy," I sighed as I sealed the report after Swanson had reviewed it in an envelope addressed to the Chester headquarters for courier delivery. A month later, I found myself at the same bar club where I first met Bryce Hubbard. I had just started a conversation with a new subject, Rob, when Bryce approached me. "Hi, Amy," he said, squeezing my hand. This upset me for two reasons. Firstly, he was interfering with my approach to the subject because I introduced myself to him as Cindy, and secondly, because a month ago I introduced myself to Bryce as Candace. I never use my real name at work. "You must be mixed up," I muttered, slightly confused. "My name is Cindy, not Amy." Bryce turned to my subject, introduced himself, took out his wallet, and counted out 5 crisp $100 bills. "Rob, if you let me get Amy out of here, that $500 is yours. And considering that her name is not Cindy, but Amy, I'm sure you'll understand that I'm doing you a favor." Rob took the money, smiled at us both, and as he left, said with a grin, "Nice to meet you three, Bryce, Cindy, and Amy." I was furious until Bryce said, "Sorry, Amy, I know I ruined your assignment, but I will pay you what you would have earned if you submitted a successful report. But before I do that, turn off the recording in your purse." Realizing that there was no point in being angry, I turned off the equipment and turned to Bryce. "Okay, then tell me, how did you know who I am?" "First, about business, how much would you earn if you completed the task and submitted a report?" $750, I replied. "Here's 800, he said, counting out 8 new bills from the seemingly endless supply of notes in his bulky wallet. I brazenly took them and put them in my purse, already overflowing with gadgets. "Fine. Now answer my question," I smiled. "I'll give you the short version, that's all that matters. After meeting you, I realized that I had to admit to myself what had been on my mind for a long time. Marilee doesn't suit me. If I get turned on by someone else as easily as I did with you, things won't work out for Marilee and I. So I broke off the engagement. After she burst into tears in front of Chester, he told her that he hired you to test him, and she told me about it in one of her attempts to get me to come back to her. I didn't have your last name, and I didn't know the company you worked for, but I came here every weekend after that night to find you again, he calmly replied. I was stunned for many reasons. I'm sure I still looked puzzled when he continued. So can I buy you a drink, this time in hopes of starting a real relationship rather than testing an existing one? He grinned. Bryce was everything I was looking for in a potential husband. 4 months later, he proposed to me, and I agreed, but having learned that he was rich, although at that time I did not yet know how much I was the first to talk about a marriage contract. He thought that I was too modest in my claims in the event of a divorce, especially taking into account the clause about mutual fidelity. In the end, he agreed to the terms I proposed, but tripled my share in the event of a divorce due to his fault, since he considered them too low. One of my main conditions before publicly announcing my engagement was that I would call Chester Wallace myself and explain the situation to him, and Bryce would confirm that it was he who was courting me, not me. When I called Chester, he invited me to lunch, even though I had told him the basic gist over the phone. I was marrying Bryce. Lunch was surprisingly pleasant. Chester expressed no hostility and fully accepted my explanations. Moreover, he was glad that Marilee forgave him and began dating a guy whom he considered more suitable for her than Bryce. It seemed to me that he never liked Bryce. As he delicately put it, Marilee doesn't have the strength of character to stand up to Bryce. You have it. You two are better suited to each other. Obviously, after Bryce and I got married, I voluntarily, although it was not easy, gave up my job as a tester because it was incompatible with marriage. Swanson almost cried. He was so sad to lose me. At the time of my departure, approximately 50% of the men I tested failed the test and 50% passed it. However, not only did I leave that job, I also left my boring research position to take a part-time job as a counselor at a local college, which was much more fulfilling. This job gave me the opportunity to do something I really enjoyed, as well as organize, host, and attend events for Bryce, helping with his business and charity. It is not surprising that I often met Chester Wallace at charity balls in our city. He was always friendly and polite, and never missed an opportunity to ask me to dance. He eventually talked me into co-chairing a charity event for his favorite organization, which turned out to be extremely successful, even though he embarrassed me incredibly with his public praise. My marriage to Bryce was good, especially the sex part. However, as is often the case in fast-paced romances, there are things that are revealed about your spouse only after the wedding that can dull the edge of the relationship. Bryce became very possessive and jealous. It started about 6 months after we got married, and by the 18th month, I couldn't take it anymore. I spoke out strongly on this matter. Chester was right, I did have the character to stand up to Bryce. I left him in no doubt that I would not tolerate such behavior, either he would change his attitude or we would break up. Not wanting to lose his sex goddess, as he called me, Bryce tried to change. He was getting better, although he had to be reminded of it every few months. Then I did not yet realize that this was accumulating deep-seated discontent in him, because he always wanted to control everything, but he could not control me. Bryce was on an extended business trip shortly after our 3-year anniversary when I received a call from Swanson Gathers on Monday morning. He invited me to lunch on one of those days when I only had morning sessions and meetings in college. It was nice to see Swanson again. He brought back a lot of fond memories, although he looked like a man in danger of a heart attack. He had gained even more weight, and I noticed that he was smoking more. We spent 5 to 10 minutes discussing recent events, and then he got to the point of the conversation. "Do you remember Cheryl?" he asked. "Certainly. She was the most low grade of all your operatives, and her boyfriend Jack, who also worked for you, was no better," I grinned. "Well, Cheryl left, and since she opened a competing agency, Stray, Pay, 6 months ago, my income has dropped. She copied my advertisements, and if I had the money, I would have sued her for copyright infringement and unfair competition, he said angrily, blushing with anger and trying to calm down by breathing deeply. But we have a potential major client. If this deal works out, we'll get 3 times the normal fee, he continued, rubbing his hands nervously. What kind of client? I asked. The subject is the suspected unfaithful boyfriend of a wealthy socialite who wants to find out if he is after her money. His name is Roger Ward, Swanson replied, sweating. And why are you telling me this? I asked, still not understanding. I really need your help, he stammered. You were my best tester, and I can't afford to fail this task. My best operative is now in the hospital after an accident, and you were still better. Can you help with this one thing, please? When should this be? I asked, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline. Most likely Friday night, possibly Saturday. Since Bryce was away for 10 days, and I had a Friday night off, and I only had an afternoon visit with my mom scheduled for Saturday, I thought for a minute. Where exactly was my next question. Perhaps it could be organized anywhere you want, Swanson shrugged. How is this? I was surprised, since I had never had such a situation before. I don't know for sure, but the client says she can organize everything, he replied. Okay, let's make it Friday, Airplane Hangar Club, I said, taking Roger Ward's dossier from his sweaty palm. I was surprised at how excited I was by this prospect. For many reasons, I decided that I should tell Bryce that I was going to the Airplane Hangar Club on Friday night, even though I wasn't going to mention that I would be working for deception. This would only cause unnecessary tension, but in fact, nothing should have happened. I would just help Swanson. I called my friend Julie and asked her and her husband Bill to come with me to create cover when I spoke to Bryce. Julie didn't mind, especially knowing that I would pay for their entrance fees. When I spoke to Bryce on the phone that evening, he showed no signs of alarm or concern about me going to the airplane hangar with Julie and Bill. Maybe he's finally completely gotten rid of his jealousy, I thought, hanging up after a pleasant half-hour conversation with him. After work on Tuesday, I started researching everything I could about Roger Ward, the potential gold digger. Sounds like a snob, more like the scion of a rich family than a gold digger, I muttered to myself as I studied his file. Nice photo, by the way, I thought, looking at his chiseled features, deep blue eyes and wavy blonde hair. Looks like a frat photo. He is handsome and confident. Why are all the pharmaceutical reps so attractive? I chuckled to myself. I wonder what his rich society girl looks like. Before heading to the club on Friday night, I stopped by the Deception Inc. office to get final instructions and pick up my gear bag. Okay, Swanson, I said, entering his office. I know everything about him that is available in public sources and that his anonymous girlfriend agreed to provide in the file. Are there any updates or specific instructions? You look absolutely stunning, darling. He definitely won't be able to resist, Swanson whistled. Like it, huh? I asked rhetorically, spinning around to show off my elegant dress. A wolf whistle would be appropriate here, he added. You are the perfect candidate for Roger Ward. Where's your equipment bag? Here she is, sweetie, Swanson grinned, pulling out a new purse. There are 2 micro cameras here. One, he pointed to the corner of the bag, takes pictures through the end, the other through the side. There is a battery pack and audio recording hidden in the double bottom, and a mini stun gun. But this time, if you can, try not to use the taser. I don't want to get sued, he chuckled, recalling the time when I had to use a taser on one too persistent object. If he understands the word no, there's nothing to worry about, I laughed. He will most likely show up at the Airplane Hangar Club right after working with a group of colleagues. Are you ready? Ready, I laughed, picking up my bag and leaving the office. In the taxi on the way to the club, I began to think, I used to go to Airplane Hangar often. I wonder if I've met this guy before. From the photo, he didn't seem familiar to me, but maybe he looks different in life. I looked through my notes one more time and then threw them into the trash as I got out of the taxi and headed towards the club. Julie and Bill were already waiting for me outside. I paid their entrance fee and we all went inside together. I chatted with them until it seemed to me that Roger was about to appear. When Roger was late and Julie and Bill started to get nervous, I let them go dancing and went to the bar myself. "Hey, Chessie," I smiled at the bartender. "Hey, this is my favorite girl, Amy. Long time no see. What will you drink?" he answered. "You don't know me today, Chessie," I winked. "And my name is Susan. Bring me a ribbon and a soda. No alcohol for now." "Got it," he grinned. A guy in a bright blue shirt immediately came up to me and tried to take me off with a terrible retort. "Hey, Red," he chuckled, obviously referring to the color of my dress. I replied sarcastically, "Oh, I see, you called me Red because you don't know my name and I have a red dress, right?" Yeah," he muttered, a little embarrassed. "Sorry, Blue," I sighed. "I'm waiting for one big, bad, and ugly one. I can't talk to you." He left, disappointed, muttering, "Your loss." "I don't think so," I laughed quietly. Chessie handed me my sandwich and soda, and just as I had finished my ribbon, I saw in the mirror Roger strut into the club, still in his business suit and carrying a small suitcase clearly marked Mentor Pharmaceuticals. He was alone, without colleagues. I deliberately sat down so that he would notice me, slightly opening my thigh through the slit in my dress. It was clear from the mirror that Roger immediately noticed this maneuver and confidently walked towards me. His line was better than that guy in the blue shirt. "Hello. I couldn't help but notice your dress. I work in fashion, but I'm ashamed to admit that I don't recognize the manufacturer or designer. I'd really like to know who it is," he said. Hearing this, I could hardly contain my laughter and asked, "So why do you have a pharmaceutical case, guy?" Apparently, this was his first lie of the evening. I smiled and placed my bag on the bar to get a good angle for recording audio and video. "Sorry, but I don't give away secrets without a name and a drink," I laughed out loud. Roger laughed and extended his hand. "I'm sorry. Ken Spate. What will you drink?" That's right, he even lied about his name. I laughed to myself. It will be so easy to expose this guy, I thought before saying out loud, "Cherry bitch." "Are you kidding?" he asked seriously, clearly surprised. "Never heard of such a thing." "The bartender knows," I grinned. "Bartender, I'd like a gin and tonic, please, and for Miss. What's your name?" He turned to the bartender. "Susan. Susan Clark," I replied. "And where do you work, Susan?" "In a boring law office as a paralegal. And you say it's in fashion, right?" I asked, and he nodded. "What do you like about my dress?" I continued, exposing my thigh even more through the cut. I noticed Roger's eyes nearly pop out of his head. After a long sip, Roger replied, "I especially like the cut on the side. That's the plating, right? It looks fantastic and accentuates the lines of the dress," he said, lightly touching the fabric, only briefly touching the skin. At least he knows what serving is, I thought, even if his phrase about fashion is no good. "Tell me, Susan, do you have a boyfriend?" he asked without wasting any time. "You're not one to beat around the bush, are you?" I noticed. "Would you rather I wasted my time on subterfuge?" "Not the best choice of words when talking to a woman, Ken," I laughed. "But no, although a little more tact would be nice." Roger was confused. Sorry, poor choice of words. Okay, I'll ask the question differently. Is your knight on a white horse here today?" "That's so flowery," I grinned. "No, I don't have a boyfriend. What about you?" "Like you know," he answered with a mysterious smile, which confused me a little. We continued talking, Roger sat down next to us, and our conversation went smoothly. When our drinks arrived, Roger sat down next to me, and we continued our pleasant conversation. I knew I shouldn't drink more than one cocktail when working with a subject, but everything was so easy that I didn't think I needed to watch the amount I drank. While we were talking, I found myself thinking, this subject is the most lustful of all those I have ever worked with. All I have left is to decide how to spend the bonus money I will receive from his anonymous girlfriend for exposing this liar. But something inside me noted, you know, if this guy weren't such a liar, he would be perfect. Handsome, smart, charming, confident. Really handsome. At some point, I excused myself and went to the ladies' room. When I returned, fresh drinks were already waiting for us at the bar. Time seemed strangely slow. I felt energetic, and although I had already drunk several cocktails, the intoxication did not make itself felt. But suddenly I noticed 4 empty glasses in front of me, and Roger's hand lightly touched my bare arm. I decided it was time to end this evening. Either he would propose to me, which would be expected, and I would reject him, or I would just go home. I felt hot. "So, Ken, it's late. It's time to move on, isn't it?" I asked. "It depends on what you mean by move on," he replied. "You have things to do tomorrow, don't you?" I asked. "Yes, but now I want to dance." "Do you like Latin American dancing, Susan? Not as boring as here." I ignored his comment about dancing being boring, even though I liked it, and blurted out, "It's my second favorite thing to do with a cute guy," before I could stop myself. It sounded like it came from a girl of easy virtue. What was that? I thought, surprised at my sudden impulsiveness. "Just for an hour. There's a Latin American club nearby. I'm good at tango, Susan." I surprised myself again with my answer because my body suddenly began to burn with heat. "Okay, Ken, you convinced me." I quietly turned off the cameras and the recorder while Roger opened his case, rearranged something in it, and then closed it. I barely noticed Roger holding my hand or touching my back as we walked towards the Latin American club, which was only 100 meters away. I became more aware of how an unusual internal heat filled my entire body. Roger was a really good dancer, and although I had a lot of energy, I could easily keep up with him, even though some of the dances were unfamiliar to me. After a bright light show, the announcer announced, "And now, for real lovers of Latin American dances, we have a special number. The forbidden dance is lambada." "Ready?" Roger asked, already leading me to the center of the dance floor. "Test me," I replied, again surprised by my response, because I didn't want to dance the lambada at all, especially with him and not with Bryce. The dance was supposed to be frighteningly passionate, but for me it was not frightening, just passionate. It seemed to me that I was not living in reality, but watching myself from the ceiling. When the music ended, I found myself in Roger's strong arms, kissing me for real. "There's a 4-star hotel nearby, and I'm not sure I'll be able to walk home. Do you want to rent a room?" Roger whispered. Again, I surprised myself when I purred back, "What do you think?" and kissed him passionately again. My loss of control became more and more obvious, but before I fully realized it, I found myself in a hotel room with an attractive guy who was not my husband. I put my bag on the table and Roger threw his briefcase on the chair. What was unusual was that I didn't feel at all guilty about what I was going to do about Roger's relationship with his anonymous girlfriend, instead of feeling like I was betraying Bryce. If he's so willing to sleep with me after just a few hours of dating, then his relationship with his girlfriend is already doomed, I rationalized, completely ignoring my own relationship with my husband. Apparently, my brain wasn't working properly. I pulled away from his embrace and said, "I need to move away," when in reality I should have said that I needed to leave and call a taxi. "What? No," Roger pleaded with a puzzled look on his face. Instead of leaving the room, I took my purse, walked into the bathroom, turned around at the door, and smiled at Roger. He smiled back with relief. I took off everything, my dress, my underwear, leaving me completely naked. Taking a damp cloth, I freshened myself up. Instead of thinking about how I was betraying Bryce, I was thinking, I already have everything I need for deception, so I need to make sure everything is turned off. And started fiddling with the gadgets in my purse again to make sure they were turned off, although I was sure that I had turned them off at the bar. When I returned to the room, Roger was already in his boxers and whistled when he saw me. "I'll be right back," he said, walking past me into the bathroom, phone in hand. I lay down under the blanket, and when he returned, we had sex. In the morning, I said, "You know, it's time for us to get ready. It's almost 9:30. We need to go home and change before starting the day." "Yes, you're right. But we need to take a shower before that, he suggested with a sly grin. I laughed as I stood up from the bed on one side and Ken Rogers stood up on the other. Yes, we need to take a shower, but you know what will happen if we go together. You first, Roger. You're boring, he fake pouted, heading towards the bathroom door. But then a strange expression appeared on his face, he froze, and then nevertheless went into the bathroom and closed the door behind him. Suddenly it dawned on me. I slapped my forehead and muttered, "You're an idiot. You called him Roger instead of Ken." Ah, with these words, I fell back onto the bed in complete disgust. My leg jerked automatically, knocking Roger's suitcase off the chair, which fell to the floor, opened, and a video camera and several business cards with the inscription, "Stray, Pay," fell out. I picked up one of the business cards and looked at it carefully. It read, "Roger Ward, Operative." I sank to the floor and moaned. Oh no, no, no. At that moment, Roger came out of the bathroom, holding my purse, and there were video cameras in it. Roger and I had a heartfelt conversation while still naked in the hotel room. "Roger, I don't know what came over me last night. I am not a slutty woman, I have never cheated, much less violated the main rule of a relationship tester: do not get involved with the object. You can't give Bryce a report on what happened. Please, I'm not going to write an honest report for your anonymous girlfriend. I don't know. I had so much fun talking and dancing with you, not to mention the best sex I've ever had, but I have a responsibility to my employer to be honest. Do you still care if I tell your girlfriend what happened?" I asked in disbelief. He shrugged. "Let everything go as it goes. After such good sex with you, I'm already reconsidering my relationship." Now I was even more stunned. Finally, I muttered, "Okay, can you at least wait until Thursday? Bryce returns from his business trip on Wednesday, and I want to talk to him face to face before he reads your report." "Okay," he smiled. Like an automaton, I grabbed my purse, went into the bathroom, and took a long, hot shower, trying to wash away the shame of cheating. It was difficult because I was still in a trance, and from time to time I remembered how good it was at night. When I returned to the bedroom, Roger was gone. There was a note on the pillow with a big smiling face on it. I quickly got dressed, went home, changed clothes, and went to my mother's, where I stayed for dinner. I tried to put the last 24 hours out of my mind. I may not have completely succeeded, but at least I was able to have a normal, drama-free phone conversation with Bryce that night. It was Sunday afternoon as I was planning what to say to Bryce when suddenly everything that had been unclear on Friday night and Saturday morning began to make sense. The fog that had been shrouding my mind suddenly cleared, and I had a partial eureka moment. I nervously played back the footage from my cameras. The camera on the end of my bag showed nothing unusual, but the one on the side of the bag, which Roger apparently didn't know about, as I saw him turn my bag on the bar, so that the camera on the end was at a 90-degree angle from showed him. While I was in the restroom, Roger was clearly visible, opening a small bottle of liquid and dropping a few drops into the cherry bitch cocktail that had been served while I was away. Then I got lucky. In my stupor early Saturday morning, right before I had sex with Roger, I apparently accidentally turned on the recorder in my purse instead of turning it off. He recorded Roger's phone conversation in the bathroom while I was waiting for him. I only heard one side of the conversation, Roger's, but that was more than enough. "Hello, Bryce. Yes, it was easy to put something in her drink that you gave me. She is now in the hotel room, waiting for me, and this remedy really works. She is like fire, but she does not realize that she was drugged. Okay, but are you sure you want me to have sex with her? Isn't it enough for her to be filmed naked in bed? Okay, it's up to you. Yes, I'll point the camera at the bed and record as many videos as you need. In fact, I have to pay you instead for you to pay me. This is the best job I've ever had in my life." This was followed by the sounds of teeth brushing and a quick shower. Now I was completely confused. Why would Bryce pay someone to have sex with me? Does he really want to get rid of me and gain an advantage in the divorce because I violated the fidelity clause in the prenuptial agreement? He enjoyed sex with me so much that even if our personalities sometimes didn't match, It was hard for me to believe that he wanted to leave me. Not finding answers to my questions, I became angry, very, very hot, like a hot Carolina Reaper pepper. I was about to call Swanson on his cell phone and see what I could get out of him when my phone rang. It was Swanson. "Hi, Amy. How was your Friday night?" he asked, clearly annoyed. "Strange, very strange. I need you to tell me who this anonymous girl is because I need to talk to her. One of the reasons I'm calling is because I was hoping you found out from Ward who she really is, because her advance check bounced and there doesn't seem to be anyone under the name she is." "She gave it to me," he muttered angrily. It was like I was hit by a truck. Bryce arranged for this anonymous girl. Apparently, he asked one of his old girlfriends to pretend to be a socialite and gave her a fake ID and a fake check. No wonder Roger wasn't worried about me telling his non-existent girlfriend about our affair. Swanson's voice brought me back to reality. "Are you still here, Amy?" Yeah. Sorry, Swanee, I was just lost in thought. It seems to me that we have both been fooled. I'm incredibly angry right now, but I promise I'll make it up to you. It may take a while. In the meantime, I'm going to take on your competitor, Stray, Pay, and his bitchy owner, Cheryl." "That's what I like to hear," Swanson laughed. We talked for a few more minutes and then ended the call. I didn't know what to do next, but I knew exactly who to turn to. A man who clearly didn't like Bryce and who, after our initial conflict, seemed to really warm to me. Of course, it was Chester Wallace. I called Chester's office Monday morning and was connected to him right away. "What a pleasant surprise, Amy," he greeted me. "You might not find it so pleasant when I intrude on your day with my problem," I replied, struggling to contain my emotions as the problems that kept me up on Sunday resurfaced in my head. "You sound upset. Tell me, how can I help? Can you find half an hour today to talk to me about a personal topic?" "I really need your advice," I said, again squeezing the lump in my throat. "Just a minute, I'll call Maureen. I'll put you on hold," he replied. Maureen, of course, was his faithful personal assistant. A minute later, he was on the line again. "Can you come to my office for lunch? I'll order food from 12:30 to 1:15. "Of course, if it doesn't bother you," I answered. "It won't be difficult at all. See you later," he said with a grin, and we ended the conversation. I put on the same outfit I wore when I first met Chester, but added the gold necklace I bought with his money and headed to his office. "Beautiful, as always," he exclaimed, hugging me. "And such a beautiful necklace," he added with a slight laugh, knowing full well that he bought it for me himself. "And my life is more confusing than ever," I sighed when we released our embrace. We were served a gourmet lunch on a tablecloth on the conference table. Not wanting to waste his time, I started talking about my situation over the meal, giving him a quick summary of all the main points. When I finished with, "I don't know how to make Bryce pay for all this," tears began to well up in my eyes. Chester squeezed my hand. With a sly glint in his eyes, he asked an unexpected question. Maybe it wasn't strange at all, but something in his tone seemed special to me. "Divorce inevitable? I don't see any other way out. After what he did, I'm definitely not going to just make peace with him," I replied, fighting back tears again. He picked up the phone on the conference table and said, "Maureen, invite Kevin here. Have someone find him if he's not in the office." "Who is Kevin?" I asked. "I don't think you've met him yet. This is my 28-year-old son. He works in our legal department as a liaison with outside lawyers," Chester replied, taking a bite of salmon teriyaki. "Is he a lawyer?" "He is my pride and joy. I graduated from Princeton Law School with honors almost 3 years ago," Chester said proudly after swallowing the fish. We chatted for a few minutes about Kevin and Marilee when a tall, handsome young man in a polo and khaki pants walked confidently into the room. "Is it urgent, Dad?" he asked. "Kevin, you heard me talk about Amy Hubbard, right? Now, finally, you get the pleasure of meeting her," Chester said. We both stood up and Kevin took my outstretched hand in both of his. "Dad often talked about you, although not in front of Mom. She has a jealous streak." Kevin laughed, revealing impeccable snow-white teeth and sparkling blue eyes. For some reason, it seemed to me that an electric charge ran through my arm, and for a moment I was speechless. Although Chester was a very attractive man, Kevin was superior to him in every way. I couldn't help but notice that he didn't have a wedding ring on his finger. Chester broke the silence while Kevin still held my hand between his. I was just telling Amy that you're a lawyer, and you came as if you were going to play golf. Chester laughed. Kevin turned to me with a sly smile and said, "My dad and I have a constant battle over what to wear during office hours. He always wears a suit and tie, and I only wear them when I go to court." Then he turned to Chester and asked, "What happened?" We all sat down, Kevin quietly munching onion rings from a plate in the center of the table while we talked. Chester briefly outlined my problem to Kevin. In conclusion, he said, "Kevin, I want you to consult with one of the sharks you work with and come up with a plan of action for Amy. When can you do this?" Well, what a lucky coincidence. We're having a combined business and social event on the yacht tonight, and Gloria Bunton will be there. "Amy can tell Gloria and me her story," Kevin said with a smile, looking between Chester and me. Then, turning to me, he asked, "Can you come at 19:30 at the port? We are not sailing anywhere. It's just nice to be on a yacht at this time of year." "Gloria Bunton?" I muttered under my breath. "She's not just a shark, she's a killer whale." After these words, I added, "It's fine for me, Kevin, but my finances may be on hold for a while, and I'm not sure I can afford someone that famous." "Oh, don't be stupid," Chester waved him off. "We keep her on a permanent contract and bring her more income than her other 3 clients combined. If it doesn't involve a long lawsuit, she'll be happy to help, right, Kevin?" "Of course, Dad," Kevin chuckled. Kevin apologized and repeated where the yacht was moored, after which Chester and I finished lunch. We carried on a friendly and relaxed conversation, with the exception of one parting phrase for which Chester was famous. "Ever since I met you, I wanted Kevin to marry you. Who knows what will happen after your divorce?" He chuckled, hugging me goodbye, and then, without looking back, he disappeared into his office, shouting loudly, "Maureen, what do we have at 1:15? Chester really is such a cunning guy," I grinned under my breath, heading to the car. "Kevin is very attractive, but I'm a year older than him, and besides, I'm still married, and of course, he probably has other girls," I repeated to myself until I convinced myself that Chester was just joking. I was impressed with Chester's yacht. I was warmly greeted by Kevin and the hostess of the event, Megan, who I initially thought was Kevin's girlfriend. There were about 20 people at the party, all from high society, but no one seemed arrogant or arrogant. Most people drank, but I abstained, and I noticed that Kevin didn't drink alcohol either. Around 8 o'clock in the evening, Kevin introduced me to Gloria Bunton. She looked exactly like she did on television, with her signature husky voice that was immediately recognizable. After a few minutes of small talk, Kevin said, "Amy, Gloria, and I will retire to the cabin to discuss business for 10 minutes, and then I will ask Megan to bring you." With that, Kevin and Gloria walked up to the upper-level cabin. I was left alone and, for some inexplicable reason, I decided to talk to Megan to get to know her better. To my surprise, after a short conversation, I found out that Megan was an employee of Chester and had no personal relationship with Kevin beyond work. After this, I had a friendly conversation with Gloria's husband. I remembered that I had met him at a charity event that I was organizing for Chester. Megan returned soon after to show me to my cabin. I told Kevin and Gloria my story honestly. They asked important and relevant questions. Gloria didn't take notes, but Kevin took notes on his iPad. When all the questions were asked, Gloria sat back in her chair for a few seconds while Kevin and I waited in silence. Suddenly, she straightened up sharply and began to speak. In 5 minutes, Gloria laid out such a perfect plan that I could hardly believe my ears. Kevin skillfully worked out a few details without interrupting her train of thought. Having finished, she asked, "How does that sound to you?" I shook my head in shock. "Wow, this is just the perfect plan. It seems that I have come to the right people. What's the first step?" "Here's my business card," she said, handing it to me. I stood up and walked over to her to take the business card from her hands. Send me an email tomorrow with all the information you have on Roger Ward, that Cheryl woman and her stray, pay, and the information on Bryce. Come to my office around 2 o'clock in the afternoon to sign the papers that will make you an official client. She laughed, looking at Kevin, who returned her the same smile. And finally, call me on Thursday morning and tell me how your conversation with Bryce went on Wednesday night, and then we'll move on to action. I can't, even express how grateful I am to you, I muttered, holding back tears. I'm glad to help. You were treated horribly, and I don't like to see good people get hurt, she replied, hugging me. Do you mind if I leave Kevin in the loop and ask him to work on this case? Please leave it, I answered, smiling at Kevin, wiping away the tears that appeared unbidden in my eyes. For the rest of the evening, Kevin did everything he could to make me comfortable and to lift my spirits. He even walked me to the car and finally hugged me tightly, whispering, "Everything will be fine." I smiled, thanked him, and left. When Bryce returned from his business trip around 6 p.m. on Wednesday, I coldly said the words every man dreads hearing in a relationship. We need to talk. Can I put my suitcase away first, dear? He tried to laugh it off. No, you immediately go to the office and talk to me. You'll take care of your suitcase later, I snapped. This caught his attention because in the 4 years that we were together, I had never allowed myself such harsh words. I motioned for him to sit on one of the sofas while I sat opposite him, with my laptop on the coffee table in front of us. Do you know this man? I asked coldly, showing a photo of Roger Ward on the screen. I don't think I know him, he muttered, breathless. It's weird because his name is Roger Ward, and you hired him to drug me and have sex, I said. Hearing a rude word from me for the second time in the last 2 minutes, although I had never expressed myself rudely in the 4 years of our relationship, Bryce literally turned pale. What are you talking about? He answered plaintively, stretching his hands forward in a conciliatory gesture. I played a video of Roger putting something in my drink, and then an audio recording of Roger's phone conversation with Bryce. For the first time since I knew him, Bryce looked completely defeated. I asked him as gently as possible, "Why did you hire someone? If you wanted a divorce, I would just leave, no drama. Is the fidelity clause in a marriage contract so important to you?" Bryce, all red, looked into my eyes and said quietly, "I don't want a divorce. I love you." "Then why did you do it?" I asked. After a long pause, he admitted, "I feel insecure around you. All men want to be with you, and you perceive my protection as jealousy or discontent. I feel like I have no power over you, and that makes me vulnerable. I thought it would give me some advantage to convince you not to let other men hit on you." Wow, that's the craziest logic based on the most false assumption I've ever heard in my life, I said in amazement, shaking my head. I don't allow men to pester me. I have never cheated on you and would never cheat on you. How can someone so successful in life be so insecure around me? What are you going to do? He asked, rubbing his hands nervously. Bryce, I can't live with this betrayal. I'll be with my mom and start filing for divorce. I hope we can resolve this peacefully. With these words, I took the car keys and left. My belongings, jewelry, personal items, and even art that I wanted to pick up were already delivered to my mother's house or warehouse, thanks to the efforts that Kevin organized. Bryce just sat there stunned as I left, although I did notice him peek out the door as I drove away. I was so depressed and so angry that I completely left the case to Gloria, Kevin, and Chester. I was amazed at how quickly and relatively painlessly everything was resolved for me when this human killer whale Gloria launched an offensive with the help of Shark Kevin, seriously using the words police, prison, and extermination. The only reason Bryce and Roger didn't go to jail was because they were sincerely repentant and I took pity on them. Although, if Gloria had her way, they'd be sharing a cell with some 150-pound bald Nazi named Bubba in prison. The divorce was finalized in 4 months, almost a record time. I received a payout that was 5 times what I would have received under the prenuptial agreement if Bryce had cheated, as well as all the art I wanted to take. Bryce, Roger, and Cheryl worked together to pay Swanson, and more than that. Swanson was very pleased, although I made him promise that he would go on a diet and quit smoking before I allowed Kevin to hand him the checks. Cheryl's company, Stray Pay, went bankrupt. Roger was banned from ever working as a relationship tester again and agreed to work 200 hours at a local women's shelter and donate 10% of his earnings for 5 years to a crisis intervention center. As part of the agreement, Roger signed a waiver of the statute of limitations so that if he defaulted on his community service or charitable contributions and got into trouble, I could not only sue him and force him into bankruptcy, but I could also prosecute him. Responsibility. I wish all this horror had not happened, although I was happy with the result, considering what happened. One strange event occurred after all the documents were signed, but before the divorce was officially finalized. Roger dared to call me and said, "Amy, I know I treated you wrong, but you have to admit that there was something special in bed. You were the best lover in my life, and if you are not an actress, I was the best for you too." I was so stunned that I couldn't find words for a few seconds, which gave him the opportunity to ask, "Are you still here?" Yes, I'm here," I replied, using all my acting skills and deception experience to appear calm. "So do you want to meet again?" "Yes, I would really like that, Amy. No prohibited substances, only love," he declared with impudence. An idea flashed in my head again, a real eureka moment. "Okay, but let's take it slow. I need to know that you are truly sorry. I need to know that you're willing to humble yourself, Roger." "I'm ready for anything," he answered excitedly. "On Friday night, I want you to put on a pink long-sleeve shirt, roll up your sleeves, put on shorts and a belt bag, and meet me at a bar called Flower Power." "What? This is weird." "I don't have a pink shirt or a belt bag," he answered dissatisfied. "So you don't want to show that you really repent. Okay, then goodbye, and don't call again," I said calmly, but did not end the call. "No, no, wait, he blurted out nervously. "If this is what it takes to be with you again, I'll do it," he said with such enthusiasm that I felt disgusted. "Where is this bar, Flower Power? I've never heard of him." "I used to go there often after college. This is a wonderful place," I replied enthusiastically. "It's on the corner of 33rd and Forest. Do you know where it is?" Of course, I'll find it. Do you want me to pick you up?" No, I'll come from another place. Let's meet there at 9 o'clock in the evening." "Great, Amy. I'm so glad." He began, but I interrupted him sweetly. "See you and sweet dreams." I had never actually been to Flower Power, but I knew it was a gay bar that was just a few meters from the restaurant I frequented. Even though I stopped Gloria from sending Roger to jail, his call made me even more angry. I called Kevin and asked him to get a restraining order against Roger, preventing him from contacting me in any way. I also asked Kevin to arrange for Roger to be served with this injunction when he left the Flower Power Bar on Friday night. I told Kevin about my plan. He almost choked with laughter on the other end of the line. To make things even more interesting, I called Flower Power from my prepaid phone about 15 minutes before 9 and asked to speak to the manager. When he picked up the phone, I said, "I hope this isn't a false alarm, but one boastful guy who doesn't like gay men said he's going to come to your establishment tonight and kick some ass. What is his name and what does he look like?" The manager growled. "His name is Roger. I don't know his last name. He's about 6'5", has wavy blonde hair, and wears a pink shirt with rolled-up sleeves and shorts. I don't think he has a weapon in his fanny pack, but I can't say for sure," I answered, barely containing my laughter. Kevin delightedly told me on Saturday that Roger had been served with a restraining order in the ambulance as he was being rushed to the hospital around 9:30 on Friday night. "Would you like to celebrate this event?" Kevin suggested. "Wow, you're not one to try to be inconspicuous, Kevin." "What, all the Wallaces have their sights set on me. I think only me and Dad, as far as I know," he laughed. Bring me a copy of the final divorce decree, and then we can celebrate." "Agreed," Kevin laughed again. From the moment I met Kevin, I liked him more and more. He used any excuse to talk to me or meet me, and I never refused. Moreover, I supported him. He was not only a stunningly handsome man, but also probably the kindest and most confident man I have ever known. I didn't see the slightest hint that he could become as jealous as Bryce. The night Kevin brought me the final divorce decree, we didn't just go out on the town. We spent from 11 p.m. to 4 p.m. the next day in his bed. The only reason we stopped at 4 o'clock in the afternoon was because Kevin got me to agree to go with his parents to the party by tickling me mercilessly. When Kevin and I showed up at the party holding hands and with "just had sex" looks on our faces, Chester and his wife Kevin's mother, who, as it turned out, wasn't jealous at all, we had even become friends, broke into big smiles. I thought Chester would break Kevin's back and shoulders. He was slapping them so hard with joy, and he just lifted me into the air with his bear hug. It was a lot of fun, but at that party I didn't have any concerns about moving too fast with Kevin, despite my experience with Bryce. I'll just follow the flow, I thought. About 3 months later, Kevin pulled the ring out of thin air. "You are sure?" "I'm a divorced woman," I grinned with a devilish smile. "Of course, I'm not sure, and in general I hardly love you, or I love you when you're naked. I don't remember exactly," he grinned. "But my parents will disown me if I don't marry you, so you'll have to say yes," he added with an even more devilish smile. "Okay, let's make love one more time, and then maybe I'll give you the answer," I teased. Kevin just grinned, and we ended up back in bed. Afterwards, I lay there, relaxing and enjoying the moment, and suddenly I realized that I really didn't want to resist. After all my experiences with Bryce, Kevin seemed so reliable, caring, and confident. He made me feel like I could relax and trust him. I turned to him, smiling slightly. "Okay, Kevin, I agree. Is it true?" he asked with a joyful smile, raising himself slightly on his elbow. "Yes, it's true. But with one condition, we will not rush into the wedding." "I want everything to be right and without haste," I said, stroking his cheek. "I agree," he replied, kissing my forehead. "You just can't imagine how happy I am." So we decided to be together, but without haste. Kevin was patient and understanding, and the more I got to know him, the more I fell in love. He was completely different from Bryce, more mature, confident, and always ready to support me. He didn't try to control me or make me feel guilty. On the contrary, he gave me the freedom to be myself. 6 months after our engagement conversation, Kevin and I married in a beautiful but intimate ceremony on his father's yacht, where I learned for the first time what it meant to be truly loved and appreciated. The guests included only our closest friends and family, and Chester was naturally over the moon, proudly watching as his son and I, the woman he had long considered perfect for Kevin, finally became husband and wife. As I looked at Kevin standing next to me and felt his warm hand in mine, I realized that this was the beginning of a new chapter in my life, a chapter in which I finally found someone with whom I could be truly happy. The past with Bryce became a distant memory, and I felt no pain or bitterness. All the trials I went through taught me to be stronger, and I knew that no matter how difficult the path was, I could always find my way to happiness. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click